Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Illusive Networks webinar, Save the SOC, How to Increase Investigation Speed, Efficiency, and Accuracy. Wherever you are in the world, we hope that you are and your family is safe and healthy during these complex times. My name is Jason Silberman. I'm on the product marketing team at Illusive. I'm only going to speak with you for about a minute or two. But our presenter today will be Phil Chen, Customer Success Engineer and SOC Expert at Illusive. So before we begin, let me just make a few announcements. One is that the webinar today is being recorded, and everyone who has registered will be able to receive the recording in an email over the next day or two. Secondly, these webinars are all the more better when we get questions from the audience. And we will definitely reserve questions at the end of today's webinar, but please feel free to ask them at any point. So we have them, on topic, and we might even get a chance to take some questions even in the middle. The way to ask questions is in the Q&A tab on the webinar control panel. And I will keep an eye on that during the course of the webinar while Phil is presenting. I will say one more thing, that today's webinar won't be a comprehensive overview of all the different aspects of the Illusive platform. You can find more information on our website on the Illusive resources page, which I'll give a link to at the end if you want more of that. But today's webinar specifically will focus on our forensics capabilities in the interest of making the SOC more efficient. With all that said, I'll turn things over now to our presenter, Phil Chen. Phil, over to you.
Thanks, Jason. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Illusive Save the SOC. So as Jason mentioned, we're not going to go through a comprehensive overview of what exactly Illusive does, but just give you a brief summary on exactly what we do. So Illusive is actually a deception technology dealing with lateral movement detection. So part of that is that we do provide deep forensic analysis on how an intruder can compromise an endpoint, what are the entry points, what are the tools and tactics that were used on the entry point, and as well as how are they laterally moving, and while we're planting deceptions for the attacker to find. So today we're going to be focusing strictly on how this tool will be able to increase the efficiency and investigation speeds of your SOC. So just some brief statistics that we have here. So as you know, during the COVID situation, we have about 70 million people in the United States working from home right now. So what does that really mean? That means that there's a lot of increased traffic on your VPN devices, and as well as on your entire network. A lot of companies are reporting that while these users are working from home, the visibility on these users has decreased. So what does that really mean? It means that if they're going out to the internet, chances are they might not be monitored by your firewalls and by your IPS devices, IDS devices, and also content filtering. So this basically leaves a gaping hole for attackers to basically try to attack your end users at home. As well as the SOC is also reporting an increase of 39% of security threats inside their organization. And this also leads to 50% of increased alerts that are already false positives. So so your SOC is pretty much overburdened already, and now they're just basically getting hammered left and right with 50% more increase. So this statistic is coming from Critical Start, and during the survey that has gone out through this during this corona period. So what we have conducted is we have our own survey that we went out, and we find that our customers are reporting in large organizations that have tier 1, 2, and 3, the average triage per incident for the level 1 is around 19 to 24 minutes per incident, and they're getting roughly about 20 to 25 incidents per day. And tier 2 they're spending about 60 minutes to 80 minutes on their typical incidents per day as well. And then tier 3 are usually your threat hunter teams, your automation teams, as well as your last final stand on triage. and they're spending around 3 to 6 hours on incidents due to the lack of information provided, as well as they might be overwhelmed with other tasks. So it's taking a longer time for them to triage incidents. So we're seeing about a 300% in SOC incidents with our customers at the moment. So the bottleneck is basically we have too many alerts coming in all at once, and therefore there needs to be more automation response and coordinations. So that's where we come in. So when we use instant forensic intelligence for any alert, we have the ability to automate our forensic collection on any system, either generated through Illusive itself or generated through one of your security platforms. So we're also agentless, which is another really big factor that we have, which allows us to retrieve the forensic information on the target machine in less than a couple seconds. And we also provide a rich artifact timeline, which will increase your SOC efficiency and speed up your incident response. So later we'll go through on how exactly that works, on how we're agentless and how we're able to get all this data in almost real time. So while we're also detecting this information, we're able to detect the infiltration entry point of an attack while we're getting the forensics. So during this time, we also can reveal any misconfigurations and vulnerabilities on that machine, find the initial infecting factor, as well as scan for malicious files. So let me touch base on that real quick. So the entry point is allowing us to understand the timeline on when a file was introduced to the file system, when it was activated, and what kind of commands were they typing in, for example, into PowerShell or into command prompt. The misconfigurations and vulnerabilities allows us to understand what type of software was installed on the machine. For example, let's say there was a patch that was installed, so you can find out exactly which patch was installed that may have a vulnerability inside of it, as well as what kind of program was installed and what version was installed. So this gives you the ability to look for that. And later on, we'll talk about some use cases that goes back to the misconfiguration part. Now, finding the initial infecting vector will allow us to see exactly how they came in. So for example, let's say they call that to a specific DNS and the DNS happens to be in a different country. Well, and then your country and your firewall is supposed to be blocking that. So this may uncover some initial misconfigurations again, that you should have been blocking something, but in reality, there's evidence that it clearly wasn't blocking. The scanning of malicious files. So as we run forensics, we're actually hashing out all the running processes on the endpoint. And we're also hashing out all of the prefetch files. And then we send that to a VirusTotal engine. And as you know, VirusTotal is a collection of all different vendors that scans hash values and lets you know if that hash value is malicious or not. So we have a threshold that you can customize that allows you to predetermine how many vendors must confirm that file is malicious before letting you know. And then we also have the ability to discover real-time connections and also apply retrospective and lessons learned. So imagine you're on the computer itself and you're doing an NPT stat on the computer, which allows you to see all the different connections in real time, all the different calls coming to the computer, all the different machines that this machine is connected to, and whether or not they're in a established state. So our forensics could be launched a couple different ways. It could be collected automatically through a API request, through a manual user intervention, just by locating your target and then right-clicking on it and going to the option of collecting forensics, or if they trip on a deception. So the tool is very versatile. You don't have to have the deception planted and for them to trigger on it in order for you to collect forensics on them. So forensics could be conducted at any time. And then we're also going to go through what kind of forensic data we're going to be collecting, such as the volatile data and non-volatile data that we'll be talking later on. And most importantly, we have a screenshot that we provide as well. So the screenshot is a real-time screenshot of what the user is currently looking at the current time. And this is grabbed pretty much the same second as you launch forensics. And some people have questions on screenshots. What does it contain? What if they're using a 4K monitor? What if they're using triple monitors or four monitors? And the answer is we collect everything. If they're using a single 4K or they're using dual monitors, you'll have one entire screenshot of all of their screens all at once. All right, and that gives you the perspective on what exactly they're looking at the current time. The next thing we have is the PowerShell and command line history. Now, this is actually very, very powerful because this is something that a lot of attackers typically use in order to laterally move. And also, in order to elevate their privilege, they must use some sort of command line. So we're able to collect all of the history information on that machine. The next common question that I get a lot is, well, how often, what is the retention period of this PowerShell and command line history? So I'll give you an example. So let's say there's a machine that was powered on at Monday morning, and they typically don't restart this computer every single night. They kind of leave it on. And then on Thursday night, you know, there's something strange happening on this machine that was triggered by your SIM or by an EDR alert, and then you want to run forensics on it. So we will be able to collect the PowerShell history on that machine all the way from Monday morning because it hasn't been restarted yet. So the key thing is to take away is that as long as the machine hasn't been restarted, you will be able to collect history information on that computer for up to the last time it's been restarted. And PowerShell supported, the PowerShell history is supported if they're using version 5 or above. The next one we'll talk about is while we're running forensics, we have the ability to identify the attack path to domain admins and crown jewels. This is something specific to the platform of Illusive, but it's also integrated into the forensic capability as well. So what this is saying is that when you can identify what your domain admin groups are, and then we can see if there are any stored credentials that belongs to domain admins on that machine at the time of when we collect forensics. And then what we also have is called crown jewels. The crown jewels is basically you're identifying what your key assets are in your organizations. It could be a host name or an IP address of any single device, or it could be like a firewall, it could be a domain controller, it could be a Swift asset. As long as it has an IP address, you can identify it as a crown jewel. And then what we do during forensics is we can go into the registry and also look at application history files to see if that machine has contacted your crown jewel and at what point in time did they contact that crown jewel. So these are all really, really important information that would allow you to surface important data to your analysts to see where this machine has been, the level of severity, and also are there any kind of privileged domain admins sitting on this machine. And lastly, who can benefit from this real-time forensics? So whether you have an EDR, you don't have an EDR, this particular solution is going to be can be used in every organization. So as you can see. Now, for those of you that are more technical, you might want to know what we collect during forensic collection. So the key takeaway is that you'll be able to get everything from the volatile data, which is everything sitting in memory, and then the non-volatile data, which is anything that is sitting outside of memory, stored on the hard drive itself. So this includes basic information such as system information, request headers, AD information. So we'll also be able to correlate the user that's currently logged in, and then we'll query your AD and let you know what this person's title is, what department they're in, information as far as what security groups this person is in. Next thing we'll have is that real-time screenshot that we talked about, well, so that you can see exactly what they're doing. The risk insight to see whether or not they have any kind of domain admin credentials sitting on the machine that are cached, and as well as have they been connected to any crown jewels. And then we also have what's called a triggering process. So oftentimes when we see some sort of alert in the SIM, for example, we see that there's a machine connected to, let's say, an IP address in Russia, right? And you don't know exactly what's causing it. You just know that there's a computer that's connected to Russia. What you would love to see is what process is behind it causing it, right? And then we also go one step above that, and we also tell you what is the triggering process that summoned that particular executable. And then later on, I'll give you a screenshot on what that looks like. Then we have the entire network segment of the forensics. So we have the connection information, the DNS information, the network information, physical network, routing tables, and shares. So why are all these very, very important? So The connection information allows you to see all the communications and ports that this machine is on. The DNS records allows you to see on this computer what DNS calls have been made on that endpoint. The network information is very important as well because it tells you what IP address that machine has. So going deeper to this, let's say, for example, an attacker was very smart. They tried to spoof their IP address, and they have multiple IP addresses stacked into the network card. So as we run forensics, we'll be able to see every single IP address that that user has assigned to that particular network interface. In addition to that, we also can see whether or not they're trying to spoof their MAC addresses, and as well as if they're off DHCP or if they're statically set, we can see all of that information in the network information tab. The routing table allows us to identify any kind of unintended or suspicious network redirections. This is also important for clients that are using, for example, proxies, or using, for example, they're not using split tunneling, and everything's supposed to be routing back into your environment. So if you run forensics on the machine and you notice that the routing table shows that they're routing their internet traffic outside of your company, then you have a problem, right? So that would be an instant red flag, and you should be able to identify that, and that would be your evidence that this particular user is bypassing your proxy. Next, we have the shares that this person is connected to. So the active shares and non-active shares allows you to see at the current time what kind of share drives that user is connected to, as well as what user was used to identify to connect to those shares. Then we got the right-hand side of the portion, which is everything that's currently in memory. So we have running services, all the services that's running on the machine. We have the running processes, which is the most important part. If someone's using a tool to laterally move, or to scrape credentials, or to hack into the browser's registry keys to try to gain access to credentials, you'll see all of those type of processes running at the current time. Then you'll be able to see the process handles, which shows us the location and registry keys that those processes are using. And then finally, Kerberos information. So that provides the user tickets on that system, and what time and duration that they're currently being assigned to. Then we have a couple of other items called advanced forensics and also miscellaneous. So the advanced forensics are going to be like the MFT data for those of you that are more technical. And we also have the full collection log of the Windows event log. So that's your system, your information, your system, security, and application log of that machine. So essentially, it's almost like saying that we're in front of the computer itself. All right. Then we have the prefetch files. The prefetch files allows us to determine if a file has been executed on system. And then finally, we have the Windows application compatibility information, which is the shim cache. So the shim cache allows us to see whether or not a file has been executed on system, when it was created on the system, and when it was last executed. All right. And then we also have, then we go into the miscellaneous. So we call the miscellaneous just, kind of things that don't really fit into memory or advanced forensics or network. So those are your startup processes. So this is also really important as well, because if you have, let's say, for example, malware infection or Trojan infection, and you think that you cleaned it out, right? You may want to take a look at the startup process to see if it's going to reapply itself upon the next time this machine starts. So that's a good opportunity to see that. The process last runtime, first and last runtime, allows you to see when a process was first launched and last time it was ran. This is also really important as well, because in a situation where, let's say, you have a script that runs every so often, right? It ran about an hour ago, and then you run forensics on it, and you want to know more about what was ran, when it was ran. So this will allow you to, this capability allows you to go back in time and see when processes were last ran. Then we got the user-assisted programs, which holds information such as file creation, last access time, modification time regarding programs that were executed throughout the user interface. And then lastly, we have the PowerShell history. So the PowerShell history is only available from version 5 and above, which gives you that full PowerShell history output, and as well as input. So this means that if an attacker was conducting like a ping, conducting a test connection, invoking Windows credential editor, you would see what they're typing in, and you would also see the output of what was given back to them, all in the same screen. And if anyone has any questions regarding our forensics collection or any additional information regarding what you're seeing here, please notate it in the questions. Jason, do we have any questions at the current time that I can help answer?
We do. We have 2 questions already. So let me just read them out. So one of them is, can the screenshot capabilities be used by a rogue employee to potentially capture financial data, etc., that may be on the screen of an actual user?
Yeah, and let me kind of elaborate on that. So can the screenshot capability be used on a rogue employee? Absolutely. So
No,
when we collect the screenshot.
No, it's not that. I think that he's asking, can the forensics themselves be compromised by a rogue employee? Like, so somebody to basically capture a screenshot of a legitimate employee who has who's looking at financial data. Can the
okay.
can a rogue employee then basically leverage the
Mhm.
screenshots?
Yeah. So that sounds like more of a DLP type of action where they has to meet some sort of criteria before triggering. So just keep in mind that we are agentless, right? So because we're agentless, we don't have a persistent agent monitoring against anything. So therefore, if a user is looking at something, we're not able to find out what they're looking at because there's no triggering criteria being met. However, let's say, for example, if you believe that there is a user doing something at the current moment, you could run forensics on the machine real time and see what they're looking at, exactly what they're looking at. So that's what we can do because we're not in the DLP business. So as I mentioned, we're agentless. So that's the big takeaway. So if there's anything related to a persistent monitoring of any kind, we cannot do that. So the purpose of Illusive is meant to be in the background so that the employees don't know that you have Illusive. It's meant to detect lateral movement as well as provide deep analysis on what's going on. So with all that being said, we don't want any of your users understanding what Illusive does or even that it's on the system. So one thing to note is that Illusive does not leave any kind of fingerprint on any endpoint. So when it runs, when it plants deceptions or when it conducts forensics, you don't know that it ran, and there's no fingerprint or indication that it's been there. So it's completely invisible to the end user. If they try looking for files, they won't see anything. And the next question is, what OSs are supported aside from Microsoft Windows? Okay. So currently, right now, let me go ahead and give you a quick overview on what we support as far as OS-wise. The forensics for Microsoft Windows is Windows 7 or above. We do not support Windows XP or anything older than that. And we don't support 2003 or older as well. So as long as it's on a Microsoft operating system of 2008 or Windows 7 or above, we do support. As far as Mac goes and as far as Linux goes, we do provide forensics as well. However, you will not get a screenshot. All right. For Mac, we provide the bash shell history. We provide the users logged in, and we also provide you with a snapshot of all the running processes currently running. Same thing for Linux as well. Linux will give you the bash shell history. It'll give you the users logged in, all the different users logged that have been on that machine, and as well as the any kind of files that are ran out of the temp folder. So those are the forensic pieces for Mac and Linux. And then for Linux, the only thing we do not support is AIX and Solaris. All other Linux operating systems are supported. Same thing for Mac as well. We go all the way back to, I believe, let's see. I believe it's quite a bit of versions that would go back. So if someone is using an iOS version that is even 4 years old, we support all the way back there.
Okay. And Phil, there was another couple of questions actually that came in. There was one that says, asks, in memory forensics, how do we collect data to detect reflective DLL attacks?
Great question. So that one would be allowing you to identify the triggering process, and the triggering process will latch on to the DLLs that you might be looking for. Within our forensic timeline, you would actually have the capability of searching for specific items. So let's say, for example, you did find a DLL that is in question. We can type in the DLL name, and it'll give you the exe that it's tied to, and it'll also give you any kind of triggering process that it's tied to as well. So hopefully that helps you answer your question.
Sure. And then the last question we have right now is, but I think you're going to get to it later on in the webinar, is about SIM integrations. So maybe we'll wait on that for now.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, John. I will go ahead and answer that question in the next couple of slides. All right, let me go ahead and continue. All right, so here's an example of what our forensic timeline looks like. So as I mentioned earlier, we collect a lot of data, right? Well, we have to be able to display back all of that relevant data in the best way possible. So this forensic timeline is one of the best ways that we can provide that forensic data to your analyst. So what you're looking at here is a single forensic snapshot, and you're inside a forensic timeline interface, which is accessed by Chrome. And then on the top there, you have a search bar that allows you to search through all of the forensic data in real time, and it's very quick. Then you have the following event time, the type, and the title. And then you also have the ability to start each one that allows you to anchor onto them. And later on, you can basically filter by star items only, and it'll give you an entire timeline picture of what's happening. Everything is broken out into chronological order from the latest to the oldest. On the left-hand side, you have all of the different forensic categories, from DNS all the way down to user session. And then following by how many artifacts are inside those categories inside the parenthesis number. So the idea is that you have the starting point, which is going to be your elusive incident. So your elusive incident could be like, let's say they triggered on a deceptive user being used, or they try to RDP to a deceptive trap server, and then they're caught, right? In addition to that, let's say you're running forensics just manually. Then you won't get an elusive incident, of course, but you'll still get all of the data on the left-hand side that I mentioned. So as you can see, in order to make it visible, you just have to create a checkbox, put the checkbox on the category, and then all of the data will be displayed. Here's another example of when we open one of the when we expand one of the artifacts, what kind of data is provided. So take a look at this one. So this one is a elusive incident on the top there, and on the bottom is just a regular artifact. So the artifact shows that it's a MSTSC, which is the Windows remote desktop, and it shows you the IP address that's coming from and where it's going. And it gives you the port number as well as the program ID number that's located on the machine. And it also gives you the timestamp of when they first executed this and what state is it in. So this is just one of the many examples that I have that shows you that what kind of level of detail that we can provide you. The next one is a running process. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have the ability to provide you with all the running process information, such as where they're running it from. Are they running it as a service or running it through a specific window? What is the SHA-256 hash value? What user are they running it as? Whether it's a domain user, whether they're running as a network service or a system, we'll let you know that. In addition to that, we'll give you the parent process, which is the most important item there. So the parent process in many triages are probably by far the most important piece of the puzzle. Because as a SOC analyst myself, I've always found a hard time to find out how they executed this program. Where did they execute it from? And then what permission levels did they use in order to execute that particular program? So the parent process gives you the idea that, okay, they used command prompt to initiate this FTP program, and they didn't just double click on the FTP program. In addition to that, you have a command line argument that they used. So in this command line, they typed in ftp.hr, which probably summons some sort of command built into the program itself. So if they're laterally moving using Windows Credential Editor or using Mimikatz, for example, if they're trying to type in a command saying, I want to use, for example, they might type in psexec / and then the computer name / username / password, you'll be able to see the entire string of what they're typing in real time. So this will definitely speed up the analyst's ability to narrow down and identify the source of the alert. So the screenshot that we're providing is something like this. So we have anonymized this information. So the IP address has been scrubbed as well as the URL. But on the right-hand side, what you're looking at is an attacker has used a tool like MBT scanner to identify a machine that's available. And then in the back end, they're actually trying to remote into the desktop. But what you're seeing on the left-hand side is, so the first thing you'll notice is that it's two different screens, right? So it's two different desktops that we collected at the same time of the incident. On the right-hand side, you'll notice that the start menu kind of looks like a circle. So that's a Windows 7 start menu. And then the start menu on the left-hand side is a Windows 10 machine. So this indicates that this person has already compromised a machine, they've already laterally moved, and they're on the machine itself. So they remoted into the other machine, which is a Windows 10 machine, and they have it on the secondary monitor, and they're kind of poking around. And it looks like they're opening up a website to try to navigate. So in this situation, we've actually caught an actor, and pretty much we're pretty much right in the middle of what they're doing. So the forensics on demand works like this. So you have a Illusive management server that's connected to your Active Directory. When a user triggers a security event, for example, like let's say they go over to a malicious website and your SOC team gets an alert from either their EDR, their SOAR, their proxy, their IDS, their AV system, or their SIM. All right, then what we'll do is they'll be able to trigger a API forensic call that goes into Illusive. And then we'll be able to conduct that forensic in real time. We'll send it through alert, and then through Illusive management, we'll be able to deploy to that endpoint. The forensic data will then come back to Illusive management in order to basically collect the data, to parse the data, and also to present the data back to you. And you can retrieve the data in two different ways. You can retrieve it back in the Illusive console, which will give you that entire timeline output that I showed you earlier, or we can basically feed that data back to you into your SOC, and the data will be fed back to you in a JSON format. So all of the data that we just saw, for example, let's say you're only interested in the memory information, or you're only interested in the non-volatile data, system information. So we can piece out. Not only can we piece out each individual forensic to you, but we can also deliver everything to you in one large JSON as well. It's a lot of data to ingest, but the option is there, all right? So it just depends on what your organization wants, what you're looking for, and as well as how it plays into your playbooks. So you mentioned what SIMs do we? A question was what SIMs do we integrate with? So we actually successfully integrate with the top four, a couple of different SIMs right now: Splunk, QRadar, Rapid7, and Logarithm, and also Micro Focus and certain Elastic SIMs as well. So we send syslog over to them, and for SOARs, we can integrate with Demisto, Splunk Phantom, Simplify, and Sentinel. Now, there's a couple other ones I may want to note as well. For example, the endpoint security. And so the endpoint security allows us to send the host name information or the IP address to your Carbon Black or Cynet or Cisco PX Grid, and it allows you to take that information and create a workflow if you want to isolate that machine. The distribution is probably the next important piece to talk about, because with all this great stuff that we have, how do you deliver the forensic down to your machine? So the default mechanism that we use is PSExec or WMI as a delivery method. But let's say, for example, you don't allow PSExec to run in your environment, and you don't feel that that WMI is a feasible solution in your organization, then we can resort to SCCM or Tanium, the next two popular distribution methods. All right, and with these two distribution methods, we feel that with these four methods, you should be able to cover any kind of organization's needs. All right. Now, let's say, for example, you don't use any of the above. We have another solution called external. External means that we'll provide you with the binary, and you can run it whenever you want at your own will. So this kind of gives you the freedom to run it whenever you want using your own deployment method. So that would, you know, that an example would be like, let's say you're using Landesk or Chef or Puppet, and you know, it's not supported currently, but you have the capability of launching integrations into it. So we'll just give you the binary and you run it. And then when you run it, it checks into Illusive and it provides all that data that I mentioned earlier, and you can still get that same information through that. All right. The cloud integrations are basically just allowing us to be installed and to work with different cloud environments. So let's say, for example, you have servers in these cloud environments. As long as you have some sort of connectivity from the Illusive management server, we'll be able to communicate to those areas. The DNS management is simply when we plant deceptions, we're also able to talk to your DNS directly in order to create those A records to redirect the attacker somewhere else. And that alleviates having to work with your network team to provide them with a list of DNS records for them to create. Lastly, we have the virus total intelligence that I mentioned earlier. So as we parse out the different hash values, we're able to send that to the virus total engine and able to tell you what files we found running that are malicious, or which files are inside the prefetch folder that are also malicious. This just adds an additional layer of protection for you. That's kind of all part of the same package. So this is no additional charge. The great thing is that, you know, if you're using one EDR system like, you know, Symantec or McAfee, now you have the capability of leveraging other vendors inside the virus total suite. And then it'll give you that peace of mind that, you know, if something's not being caught by your own EDR, other EDRs might be verifying the same thing. So now we'll go into some simple use cases on what we're currently seeing with our customers. So we have a bank, a pretty big bank actually. They mentioned that Illusive Forensics has reduced their response time by 90%. So before Illusive, they had a manual process of isolating the computer and conducting incident analysis. They didn't really have any kind of source-based forensics or any kind of reliance on big data. All right. And afterwards, we were able to speed up the entire process by providing that screenshot to them, as well as providing triggering processes and also surfacing any kind of connections that we think that they may want to see. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that we have some analyzers built into the forensic tool already. So if the analyzer shows that there are, let's say, for example, an established RDP connection already coming in or going out, we'll let you know in the analysis page that we found malicious files. We found incoming RDP connections connected to that machine, and we also found, you know, of course, domain admins on that machine, as well as connections to crown jewels. All right, so those all part, you know, it really streamlines the triage to let the analyst know right there in their faces that something major is happening. All right, even before they start triaging. So this really streamlines the SOC process to integrate Illusive Forensics with the SIM or SOAR, and it provides enrichment data to supplement gaps within their EDRs. So to accelerate the navigation process, currently, you know, in a tier 1 environment, they may spend about 20 minutes 20 minutes before Illusive on a single incident, right? So most SOC environments have some sort of SLA, and they'll typically spend about 20 minutes or less, you know, to take a look at the incident. And after they collect our forensics, they now need to spend only 1 to 5 minutes. So this saves an average analyst 5 hours per day if they get about 20 incidents per day. So as you can see, this is going to severely reduce the amount of time that your analysts are taking, you know, triaging. And absolutely, this is making your SOC really efficient doing it this way. So for tier 2, about 60 minutes of triage time, it goes down to less than 10 minutes. And tier 3, as I mentioned earlier in that first stage, they spend about 36 hours, right, like triaging. But now they spend 30 minutes because in order for a tier 3 to fully, you know, indefinitely say that we need to close this incident or get to that point where they find that they have finite amount of evidence to determine what is happening, the Illusive Forensics provides all of that source of truth data that they're looking for in order to come to a conclusion. All right. So so next step is if you're interested, request a demo, and we'll be happy to show you the entire Illusive platform as well as the forensic data. You can also visit our website and take a look at our blog to see what kind of updates that we're integrating with. And just now I want to just go and take a moment and answer any kind of questions that anyone may have regarding anything that we've covered so far.
Yes, a reminder to people that if you want to ask a question, we have a couple minutes now. You can ask in the Q&A tab. Also, while we'll give a minute for questions to come in, I'll remind people that you will receive a recording of this webinar as soon as we can. And so keep an eye out for that as well.
All right. Currently, I don't see any questions popping up. So I just want to give it back to you, Jason, and we can conclude. Thanks everyone for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
One question did just come in right now. Phil,
Okay.
do we have to have deceptions in place in order to run the forensics part on demand?
Great question. So the answer is no. You don't have to have deceptions planted in order to run forensics on demand. So let me kind of elaborate on the landscape of forensics on demand. So you can pretty much run forensics on demand on any machine within your domain, as long as there is a network connectivity that goes from the actual Illusive management server all the way down to the endpoint. You don't need to have any kind of deception planted. The only capability we need to have is the delivery mechanism. So the delivery mechanism is simply, you can use whatever program you want, like SCCM, Tanium, WMI, or PSExec. We basically authenticate to the machine. Once we authenticate to the machine, we can drop the binary down. When the binary runs, it basically contacts Illusive on port 443, and then it will basically use that 443 connection as a conduit to send all of the forensic data back to where it came from. So this can basically work in multi-VLAN environments, multi-regional environments, and we have customers right now with with 1 or 2 management servers in the world, and they pretty much cover all of their global endpoints. We have customers that we're covering up to 400,000 endpoints from a couple different management servers. And these forensics on demands, there's no limit. There's no limit of how often you can run them or where you can run them. As I mentioned earlier, you can run them whenever you want, wherever you want, as long as there's some sort of network connectivity that goes back and forth. So if they're home, in their homes, for example, and you're able to contact them on VPN, you can still reach them. And right now, a lot of our analysts that are using Illusive right now are doing this. Next question is, how is the Illusive solution works in the geographical area where they have multiple sites across? Can we manage from one central location? Yes. So we have a solution for that as well. So let's say I'll break it down to 2 different scenarios. You have branch sites that might be completely isolated and they have no connectivity whatsoever, right? In those environments, you must have some sort of site-to-site or some sort of VLAN that can talk back. In the geographic location where, let's say, you have multiple areas and they're kind of segregated by VLANs, but they're still somewhat connected together, you may need to poke a hole in the firewall that allows one central port to communicate. We do have the ability to do a managers of managers, for example, which is a single pane of glass that allows you to control multiple managers across the board. So whether it's a single manager that has access to multiple domains, and we are not domain, how should I say, we don't require transient trust when you do a deployment. So that basically means that, let's say you have domain A and domain B. They're not part of a forest, but they have some sort of limited connectivity between each other, right? So you install Illusive on domain A, and then you have a service account for domain B. So all you have to do is specify what account you want to use in domain B, and then when we go deploy that forensic data, we'll use the credentials given to us for domain B. So we don't need any kind of trust in between each other, just network connectivity to those endpoints. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great. Maybe there's one more that just came in. Oh, that was it. You just saying that was answered. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions as of now. So I want to thank our presenter, Phil Chen, for presenting today. I hope you found this webinar valuable and informative. As I'll just review again some of the next steps on the screen. If you want to request a demo of all the different elements of the Illusive platform, first if you want to see the forensics in action, but also if you want to see more about deceptions, or we have another part of our platform called Attack Surface Manager, you can request a demo at the link there, illusivenetworks.com/demo. On our resources page, we also have all of our previous webinar recordings. We have white papers, we have other case studies and items of content that you might find interesting. You can find that there. Our blog, we also focus on forensics, but also all aspects of cybersecurity. So be sure to check that out as well. And you can follow us on our social platforms as well. We wish you continued health. And we thank you once again for coming to the webinar, and have a great rest of the day wherever you might be. Thank you, everyone.